Hi, this is Mike Messier of Avalonia 7 Theater Festival. I'm here with Jennifer Walton. Jennifer, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing just great. Thanks, Mike. It's nice to meet you virtually.
Jennifer is the winner of our Wildcard category, which is a category you actually invented, Jennifer, without even knowing it. But
Wild.
it's nothing, no big subterfuge, folks. We really just had so many great plays that were submitted, and there was some categories that had more submissions than the others. Jennifer's play, My Pretty Pink Rifle, could best be described as a dramatic monologue from the perspective of a 6-year-old girl. And Jennifer, I'll let you tell us more about the monologue.
Well, it's called My Pretty Pink Rifle because a little girl, Sophie, gets a little cricket pink rifle for her birthday, and things go horribly wrong, as they sometimes do with kids having guns in their hands. So I wrote the piece based on an artist whose name is Anne-Sophie Kestelin, who had done a series of photographs of children um, in the U.S. and they were posing with these little cricket rifles, and she did a little interview with them, and I found this piece that she had done, which was what I had used for the prompt, and from there, the piece just kind of wrote itself. Sometimes that happens, but do you want more specific details about the monologue itself, Mike? Or
Well, you know what, I would maybe go, because I don't want to give away too much about the
Mm.
actual piece, but I do want to talk about the subject of guns. And
Yeah.
I'm here in the Southeast United States, and I just moved here. So as I moved from the Northeast USA to the Southeast USA, my running joke was that I could feel my blood getting redder with each gas station and rest stop. But
Yeah.
my point is not to make fun or pick sides of anything,
Yeah.
because I do believe in the right to own guns, but at the same time there needs to be regulations and really just common sense on the behalf of people who own guns, who choose to own guns.
Yeah.
There needs to be more common sense, and your piece, very dramatically in a non-preachy way, gives us what could happen in a worst case scenario.
Well, and it's interesting because I've had this piece has had some performance. Well, actually, not performance, but some staged readings as well in the past. And I've had some great feedback about it, and I've been schooled a couple of times by gun owners who said this would never happen. Responsible gun owners. The a kid would never be allowed to have the gun in the circumstances that you wrote about. And yet, if you do a quick Google search on any given day, you'll see that sadly, guns happen, or accidents happen with kids and guns on a very regular basis. And so I didn't want it to be about, um, I didn't want it to be preachy. I just wanted to tell the humanity of that and of that sort of circumstance. And I think for me that was the most important thing, and also just to capture the innocence of the little girl, but also to address that kids get scared, and we all have fears, and just really I wanted her to be a really human little girl that had an incident happen to her that really was an accident, and yet should
And
kids have guns for their 6th birthday? I don't know. It's going to make me pretty unpopular, Mike, I feel, this interview.
well, I think it's a thing where, the nature of theater to me is to challenge the audience, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes, um, you know, I mean, there was plays that I would take my mom to see on Mother's Day and her birthday that may be mainstream plays that have been commonly accepted. A funny thing happened on the way to the forum or whatever, but there's nothing wrong with those type of mainstream general audience plays. However, theater, to me, the best theater is always going to challenge people, provoke people. And these gun owners that were giving you a hard time about your play, well, one thing that maybe if you had a collection of these newspaper clippings that said, well, maybe 999,999 times out of a million, something bad won't happen. But here's the one time that it did. And
Yeah.
all it takes is one life lost to equal a tragedy. And it's kind of like the thing with the police. I mean, we keep hearing, well, most cops are good. Well, tell that to George Floyd or his family. You can't, because he's
Yeah.
dead now. So, I mean, where was the one good cop when somebody got killed? And not to get on a liberal bent or but anything. It's just a situation where there's always going to be exceptions. There's always going to be bad scenarios. And your play, your monologue, My Pretty Pink Rifle, explores a nightmare scenario.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I think probably being Canadian, we don't have the same gun laws here. We don't have the same ownership rules. It's not gun ownership is not as widespread in Canada. Uh, However, it is a thing, and we have gun deaths here as well. And you're not going to see children probably owning guns here in Canada, but you know, it's challenging. I wrote another play. I went through a little gun phase, which which is curious, but based on an incident that my son was involved in, actually, and it was a pellet gun incident, and it really. I found this piece while I was researching that other play, which was called Gunplay, and and I think what I really wanted to explore was about why do people want to own guns? What is the psychology behind that, or the philosophy, and try not to be too judgy about it. It's just that, the logical conclusion of this story that I told ends in tragedy. So obviously, as you said before, it doesn't always, but for me, uh, being really immersed in gun culture and doing so much research, and having a teenage son as well, who, was really obsessed with pellet guns for a little bit there. Uh, it was
You didn't say
curious to
to
me.
him, "You'll poke your eye out," did you? That never came. You'll poke your eye out from a Christmas Story. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, but
Yeah, I did for sure. I probably did, but in the end, he got into some trouble with the pellet gun, and so it's just there's a fascination there. It's a powerful tool, and it means always so much more than just the gun itself, right? It stands for so much more in so many different ways to different people. So, is it safety? Is it Is it fear? Is it entertainment? Is it fun? Is it exciting?
empowerment or
Empowerment?
people might feel like, hey, if the world goes to hell, I want to have my rifle to take somebody out. If I'm going out, I'm taking somebody with me. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. It's I laugh, but yeah, it's a sad reality, and I don't. That's not something. I don't own a gun, so I can't really comment about what that might feel like. I remember being a kid and hanging out at my uncle's farm and using his rifle to shoot cans down the end of the field, and it was pretty exciting stuff. But guns are so pervasive in American culture for sure.
And they're also easily obtained here. I mean, for better or for worse, they're easily obtained, which I think is kind of the point of your piece. And I think that
Yeah.
the responsible gun owners, I can't speak for them, but I know that, once again, the majority of responsible gun owners want safety for all users, and they fear accidents, and they're responsible. But sometimes people can get lax, they can get lazy, they can get content, and your play explores, once again, a nightmare scenario. But on a different topic, what else is going on with your life? What else can you tell us about your experience with playwriting? Let me ask you first: were you born and bred in Canada, or did you move there at some point in your life?
Yeah, no, I've always lived in Canada, and it's a great place to live. It's not a perfect place to live. I think a lot of the things that you're seeing shifting in the U.S. We're your very close neighbors, and we're seeing a lot of the same shift here as well. I think Canada, sometimes we get a little virtuous, about everything being so perfect. We've got our work to do here as well. And, I think for the most part, it is a great place to live. And we're still having to work on our social justice issues as well. So.
Is not to be stereotypical, but is hockey something that was part of your life growing up? Because I know hockey is huge in Canada.
Hockey is huge in Canada, and it has not been very much about my life at all. Now, basketball, a couple of years ago when the Raptors won, that was a big deal around here.
They're still the reigning champions. They haven't been unseated yet because the season's been on pause. So you're still the home of the NBA champion Toronto
That's
Raptors.
Right. Yep, exactly.
And what about yourself? Sorry to cut you off, but Jennifer, are you a writer by trade? Is writing a passion of yours for most of your life? Is it something you got into more recently? Tell us about your history with writing.
Sure. So I started, I'm an actor, and I also, for the last very long amount of years, I've run a theater company, an acting school for children and teenagers. And so I've done a lot of writing for my students, and I think it's probably why I tend to find my voice as a writer tends to skew for younger characters. But I would say probably about 10 years ago, I got a little more serious about playwriting, and I have written a number of things, but I started a women's playwright collective in my town, and it was a really empowering experience. And also I do belong to the Theatre Aquarius playwright unit in my town, I just live just outside of Toronto in a town called Hamilton. And and so I think more and more I find myself leaning more towards writing, and just really finding that at this point in my life, I have things I want to say, and I love writing for actors, and but I am still an actor, and I still and I do direct as well, and so I think in many ways that's really helpful to me, in that I I'm enjoying writing with the idea of an actor's eye and a director's eye as well. So I'm thinking about theatricality when I'm writing as well. I find that lately, with this whole shelter-in-place pandemic, I had a couple of staged readings that were to happen with work that I'd written. So it's always disappointing when that kind of stuff falls through. But I've also really enjoyed having the opportunity to take some online playwriting classes, and I'm still meeting virtually with my playwright unit. And so we continue to try to find a way to create. I would say probably the one thing I haven't been too interested in is writing anything that's pandemic related. So I don't have it yet.
Yeah. It's something that, when this thing first got going, people were telling me, and I'm sure telling you and others, hey, you should write a coronavirus play or a coronavirus musical. But I just got the feeling like, man, I would rather not, because if nothing else, you feel that in 2 years, there's going to be a flood of coronavirus movies and coronavirus-inspired shows. And I just felt like I'd rather concentrate for myself on things like Distance from Avalon, the story that inspired Avalonia 7th Theater Festival, and the new photography competition we have, the Avalonia Photography Competition, and our film festival. So it's tough because I think creative types are often privy to having people suggest they hop on the latest bandwagon or the latest trend. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, we're not designed like that. We all have our own stories to tell. But has this coronavirus given, like you said, you've been taking these playwriting classes, have you found an upside to the time that we're experiencing the last 4 or 5 months?
I think that it has provided an opportunity to be quiet, to just kind of. My cat has come to visit. I don't know if you can see him yet. He's gonna just be all
It's
in.
okay. Good looking cat. What's the
Yeah,
cat's name?
Pablo. Yeah, okay, he's good. Yeah, I just think in terms of like being quiet, the week before everything shut down here in Canada, I went to the theater, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We were out for dinner. We did this, we did that. It was a great weekend to go out on, that's for sure. We saw Hamilton, the musical, and we saw a couple of really cool pieces of theater that week. And then everything was done, and it was quiet. And I think that at first I thought all I would do for the whole time was I'm going to write, I'm going to turn out this play that I'm supposed to have a second draft of with the playwright unit that I'm working with. This is going to be so productive. And then it really wasn't. I struggled, and I'm still struggling a little bit to write. But I think maybe just in terms of just taking a moment to realize what's important, and spending time with your immediate family. And I go down and visit my mom, take her groceries, and I wasn't finding that I was having all the time in the world to do those kinds of things. So just chilling out a little bit, I think, has been the most important thing to realize. And also maybe just to feel all the feelings, because I think in some ways, the pandemic and protests and everything that's been going on, there's been a real tension between sitting at home and doing nothing, and a lot of really critical dramatic things happening all at the same time. So it feels like peace within chaos. And so it's probably going to be a little while before I feel like I really can sort through what this time has been about. I don't think we know 100% yet, except for that it feels like someone has thrown everything up in the air, and we'll see how it lands at the end of this. So
Jennifer,
yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I was listening to what you said, and it brought to mind the question that I haven't heard much about Canada and coronavirus. I've heard about Italy. I've heard about some countries are doing better than others. How has Canada done as far as keeping the numbers low, or have they been high? Or how's Canada doing with coronavirus in general?
How are we doing? We're doing really well. We started out on a not a great trajectory, and so our government, Canada is a lot smaller in population than the U.S. is. So I get that it's a totally different animal completely, but we shut down. Everything shut down here. We've just moved into phase 2. So when I see that you're sitting on a patio and in a coffee shop, our patios opened last week. You actually can't go into a restaurant to eat yet. So our numbers are good. We have in the province I live in, I think we had about 100 and something cases today, which is like crazy, not a lot. But everybody kind of has stayed home for the last 3.5 months. My son did his last couple months of school, March and April, in university from home. Like, classes are online, school was canceled. It just was kind of crazy. My partner runs a program called Shakespeareans, which is for under-resourced kids across our province, learning the magic of Shakespeare as a literacy tool. And he's always run that as a summer camp, and he's doing it online this year for the first time. So we're not allowed to be running summer camps, and there's no theater, and it's just been, there's been probably a lot more government intervention in terms of shutting everything down. But our numbers are really good now because of that. So at first our curve was like this, and now we're like this. So
I'm glad to hear it. I mean,
yeah.
good for you guys, you know.
Yeah.
And, Canada is always a country that, you know, it seems like a really cool place to me because I do have French Canadian ethnicity myself. So, and I was telling you before we went on the air here that I had an uncle that was in pretty close to where you are, New London. Uh, and I went to see Niagara Falls. My dad took me up there when I was a kid, so I had some fond memories of Canada. And, Jennifer, what else? If people want to find your work, do you have a website? Do you have a social media presence that you want to share, or not so much? It's up to you. But if you have anything like that you want to share with us, let us know.
Sure. I do not have my own website. I do use New Play Exchange. I'm not sure if you use that
Yeah,
at
I'm
all.
on that. I'm on that, and
Okay.
we interviewed Brian Cern today, another playwright from
Yeah.
Avalonia 7. He's on there too, so we can put your
Yeah.
link. If you want us to, we will. We'll put the link on the website.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I think my Twitter handle is Jenny L. Walton at Jenny L. Walton, IE. And absolutely. That's great. But I do love New Play Exchange. It's been a really great opportunity to not only read other people's work, but to get your own work out there and kind of that wonderful community of playwrights all over the world. I think it's always such a treat when you find someone's read your work and taken the time to write you a recommendation or to comment on it. I met or I haven't met him in person yet, but I have had a wonderful exchange from a playwright who's in London, Ontario here, that I'd never met before, but he found something that I'd written on New Play Exchange, and so we've kept in touch from then. So it's pretty cool to be part of a global community, and there's so many great writers out there. So. And all of us are so appreciative of contests like Avalonia 7 and getting our work out into the world in various places like Florida. And
Yeah,
I
Jacksonville,
had
Florida.
and I had this play was shortlisted for something in the UK as well as so it's great to be able to get your work out there into the world. So.
Do you have other plays that you've either finished, Jennifer, that you want to talk about a little bit, or anything that you're writing now that you want to mention, or a work in progress? Go ahead.
Yeah, the play I'm writing right now is about a performer who kidnaps a critic on stage. So I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm also having a lot of frustration with that one. So I don't know how that one ends yet, but we're working on it. It's kind of interesting to just to kind of break down that relationship between artist and critic and the role that criticism plays in the theater, and what do we expect from our critics and what do we expect from our artists in terms of criticism, and basically that whole theater ecology. So that's what I'm writing about right now. And the last play, the play that I was supposed to have a staged reading at our professional theater in town called Theater Aquarius, is called Gunplay, After the Gun Goes Off, because I've got a gun theme going on. And it's about a teenage boy who's inspired by real events, who uses a pellet gun next door to a school, which triggers a full active shooter response, and sort of a clash between the police officer, one of the police officers on site, who's experiencing PTSD, and this boy and his mom, and how they navigate the justice system. And it's also restorative restorative justice. So what can justice look like, and an exploration of that. So I don't tend to be writing light things.
Well,
I wish
I think
I did more comedy.
Well, I mean, isn't the expression the difference between comedy and tragedy is timing?
This is
You know
true.
what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
that Abraham Lincoln joke, Mrs. Lincoln, besides that, how was the rest of the play? I mean, you couldn't tell that in 1870, but you can tell that in 2020 and get a chuckle.
Yeah, for sure.
What, just a question that came to mind as you were speaking is,
Mhm.
um, was there any play or moment as a young person that inspired you to have an interest in theater? Was there maybe you were a young girl and somebody took you to see a play, or you saw something on television, or you saw a movie, or was there anything that kind of turned you on? Was there any epiphany moment, Jennifer, of, hey, the dramatic arts or writing, acting, directing, that's for me? Was there anything like that?
It's funny because my original love of going to the theater is absolutely nothing connected to what my preferences are these days. But every Christmas we went to the pantomime. The old British pantomime shows. There was a guy that toured called Dick Whittington, and it was so fun as a kid, to go, and he would pull people up from the audience. And I think I got to go up on stage once, and I was just little, and I just thought it was magical, just this whole experience of being in a room with, everyone who's enjoying themselves and having a great time. And there was such magic and beauty on stage, and everyone's laughing. And I remember it being a really magical experience. And um, I was just loved it. And I'm sure I saw other things, but my parents were not huge theater goers. It wasn't a huge part of our life. But then I remember, discovering the school musical, and um, just, starting to write plays back then when I was a little kid. That made all my friends put on, my classmates do what I wanted. But yeah, it was such a joyful place to be. And I think, all of us who love the theater so much are probably really feeling, I don't know about you, Mike, but that missing that experience of being in the audience, and just that communal shared experience. I also do, one of my side gigs is I do comedy dinner theater, and murder mystery, and it's interactive. And sometimes, especially over the holidays, when you're doing show after show after show, and you're driving to here and there and everywhere, it's exhausting. But I try every single show to just take a moment and look around at all of the faces of people really enjoying themselves and laughing, and kind of just, bathing and reveling in that experience of that shared feeling, you know,
I
communion of enjoying something together.
I know what you mean because I was a dinner theater actor, Murder on
No.
Us Dinner Theater, and
Oh, it's a
yeah.
mystery to me.
Oh, that's the
That's
name of your
what
group?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
not mine, but it's the company I work for. Yeah, for sure.
yep. This
Did you
gentleman named
enjoy it?
I did. I was there for many seasons in Providence, Rhode Island. John Thayer. I mean, we did shows in Massachusetts, Connecticut, but mostly Rhode Island.
Mm.
And the probably the most well attended show we did annually was A Deadly Christmas Carol, and my character was Tiny Tim.
Oh my
So
gosh.
it was a sight gag because I'm a pretty big guy. So me playing Tiny Tim and doing the little voice, and my Tiny Tim had leprosy in our play, so I was constantly losing parts of my
Oh
body
my gosh. I
various
love it.
times. And it
That's
was true. I
awesome.
mean, we had I want to say the early years of when I was doing this, we would literally do 8 shows a week.
Mhm.
We because there was private parties,
Yep.
businesses, and this was
Yep.
their gift to their employees, and we had a good time. And we would do 2 shows on Saturday, like I think it was a 6 o'clock and an 8:30 or something like that. But we'd do back-to-back shows, and the
Wow.
show's about 3 hours long. So maybe it was more like 5 and 8. And we
Yeah.
had to, as soon as the first show was over, we had to get those people out of there
That's
because the next show,
exhausting.
yeah, it was wild. And
Yeah.
they even gave us a discount on the food for ourselves. So,
Okay.
but
Yeah, you gotta negotiate the good meal.
we had a good time. It was a good run. And
Mhm.
some other things you were talking about. When I was a kid, my mom worked for a local theater company called the Burke Community Players, and she took me to see their production of The Odd Couple. and the guy that played Oscar was the father of a good friend of mine. Ed Johnson was the actor's name, and he was my buddy's friend, and he looked a lot like Jack Klugman, looked very similar from the TV show of The Odd Couple.
Right.
So I remember, not that I was confused because I knew it was two different guys, but I thought in my mind, maybe briefly, that if you were an actor in a local theater, you had to look like the actor that was on TV because he looked very similar. The hairstyle, the face, everything, and he kind of acted like Jack Klugman too. So I was always, for a while, I had to get out of that. Like, oh, you don't have to look like the guy on TV doing the same role. You can bring your own thing to the presentation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's great. I know.
But,
As kids, we get fixated on something sometimes, right? And then it becomes our reality. I have to say, I have loved getting to teach young people acting because they keep you fresh all the time. They challenge your ideas, and working with young people is such a gift. And of course, it's been a little while now since I've had the opportunity to do that. Doing a little bit of stuff online. And I'll help my partner Marvin with his program a little bit online, but he doesn't really need me to help teach in the room. But it's such a gift to get to hang out with young people, and I just have always loved it. I've always felt like my students have always been my best teachers in that way.
that's a great line. That your students have always been your best teachers. And there is an interesting thing in the last 4 or 5 months, whatever it's been since March. It's forced a lot of people like myself that, like, okay, now you've got to do something on Zoom. Now you've got to do something on Skype. Now you've got to do something on Facebook. Like things that maybe we never wanted to do before. We're kind of forced to if we want to stay relevant or stay in the game, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing more Zooms. I never did Zoom before Corona. I did Skype, but very little.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's coming up all the time, and it's interesting. And I do want to, if you think that playwright class that you're taking, playwriting class online, if that's something that you think is worthy of mentioning, if you want to mention that, like what it is, if other people can sign up for it, or if it's a private class, you can keep it to yourself. But I don't know if that's something that's available for anyone, if that's a series of podcasts.
Yeah, I don't know. And it was through a theater in Toronto called Tarragon Theater. And it was an 8-week program with a fantastic playwright herself her name's Paula Wing. And it was really great. It's over now, unfortunately, just finished last week. I don't know when they'll be offering the next thing, but I will say I think in terms of online Zoom classes, there have been so many offerings and the opportunity to watch other people's work as well on not on Zoom specifically, but just to being able to live stream, or not live stream, but stream other people's plays, and the National Theatre in the UK. And I watched something from Tarragon the other day, actually, called The Late Show. And these plays that normally they're just for archival purposes, we're having the opportunity to see some really great stuff that we wouldn't normally get to see. It's not the same as being in the room, but it's pretty magical nonetheless. So I would just really, if you're an artist looking for things to do, I think there's probably no shortage of online classes you can take on camera, writing. Check out Tarragon Theatre. They may have something else soon that they're offering. I know I'll be signing up again. I just found having a space each week where you show up, you do your writing prompts, you have to sit in front of the screen and get your work done. But also getting those prompts sometimes helps you to approach the work in a different way. I know the stuff that I did in that class, I've used a lot of it in the play that I'm writing right now. Just to, shift the perspective a little bit, or, just get started or shake something loose a little bit. So, yeah.
I would also suggest, for those that aren't subscribed, Play Submission Helper. or play
Yeah.
submissions. Nice. They do have, I think it's Andrew Black, the Plays the Thing podcast. It's like a 12-part podcast, and it's pretty. I guess the word I want to use is containable. Like I think each podcast is about 40 or 45 minutes, and Andrew has a nice little. I think he's got a PDF for every podcast,
Oh,
so
okay.
that comes with people's paid subscription to Play Submissions Helper, and if people are not already on Play Submissions Helper, they can use the promo code Mike. That's my name, Mike, Mike uppercase, to get a 99-cent first month trial. Whatever you want to call it.
And I will tell you, that's where I found out about Avalonia 7. Without Play Submission Helper, I would not have submitted to your festival.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer, and that appreciate that. And Harrison over at Play Submissions Helper does a great job, and
Yeah, sure
it's really a cool website because what it does for playwrights that aren't familiar, it takes the kind of the nuts and bolts of each festival, where they're located, if there's a submission fee, if they have a website, it gives you the link, and it basically says like, hey, we're looking for, you know, monologues, or we're looking for a one acts, and really what it does is it saves people the time of Google searching emptily, like, oh, play festival in the, you'll never find the information on your own that you'll find through Play Submissions Helper. And once again, use promo code Mike. And because I met the owner of the company, he and I sat down and I gave him my thoughts and my feedback, and then we came up with this promo code for people to try, to give it a shot. So
that's great. And you know what I love about it too, if you don't mind me jumping
go for
in, is it's all laid out in an Excel spreadsheet. And so it's very easy to keep track of what have you submitted to, what have you not, what did you hear back from. So I would use that as my template for like, what have I submitted to? And then also when you pay for your subscription, you can look way ahead, like months and months in advance. And so you can see kind of what's coming up. And then if there's a prompt in one of those little submissions that makes you go, I could write something for that, then you can get started on it in advance and have some fun with it. So it's a great resource.
And Jennifer, you just taught me something, because the whole 2 years I've been using this thing, I never used it to that advanced level. I've been using the PDF and trying to go by memory, and then I have to dig through my past emails to see who I've submitted to and who I haven't. So thanks for explaining that further level with the Excel. That's cool, because I'll start doing that.
It is cool. It's very cool. And I don't think I made that up myself. I think somebody else told me to do it, that was a good way to do it. And it's a really great way, because, you can't remember. I can't remember. I submit a lot. And actually I haven't recently, but I was for a while there. And I think probably because I'm more focused on writing right now than submitting. But I was not remembering what I'd submitted to. And then, it's nice when you get a little email that says, yay. And then, I mark mine in green or yellow or red, depending upon what my outcome is on those. So
that's very cool. I'm going to start doing that. Well, Jennifer, as we wrap up here, is there any final words you want to say to anybody? Any words of encouragement for other writers or potential writers, or anything you want to say as we wrap up?
Yeah, well, I'd like to say, first of all, thank you to you. Thanks so much for providing opportunities for writers like myself to put my work out there. And I would say, if you're a writer, just write, get writing, keep writing, put your work in front of actors so that you can hear what it sounds like, create a community so that you can, amplify other people's work as well as yourself. Have some fun with that community. Figure out what you want to say it, and have fun doing it, because it's pretty amazing to have the opportunity to share that with a wider audience. So, and thank you so much. This has just been a treat, and I appreciate meeting you, Mike, and also having the opportunity to talk to you and be a part of your festival. I have one question for you.
Yes, please
what
do,
do you
Jennifer.
think? When are we doing live theater again?
I hope it's. My prediction now is to be in Florida at least. I don't think we're doing anything till 2021. There is
Same
one.
here in Canada.
Yeah, I was holding out. I was hoping to do the show in October, but the theater hasn't even opened at all. and there's been a surge in cases. And I think the other thing that's, at least on a humanitarian level for myself, I don't want to put people in a feeling that, hey, if we don't rehearse tonight, Mike's going to be mad at me. Because sometimes
Right.
actors won't tell you how they really feel.
Hmm.
And I was cast in a stage play that was supposed to go on stage in May, and we had to postpone, and everyone's disappointed. But you really do have to put people's health first. So I'll be happy if we do this live event a year from now, which is exactly why I said, man, I got to interview some people and keep the mojo going. You know what I mean? For our
Yeah.
festival here.
Yeah, I do, and I think that you're absolutely right. Safety first, and I think we'll all be really craving getting back to the theater when it's safe to do so. And I hope you stay safe and healthy, and you're doing okay. You're healthy so far, so good.
So far, so good. You know, thank you for asking. So far, so good. Everything's okay with me, and just staying active and staying busy as much as I can without being too busy.
Yeah.
It's a conflict. I did want to ask you a real quick question, even though
Hmm.
we're in overtime here, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
You mentioned, no, it's all right. We're having a good chat. You mentioned the role of critics and writers and
Yeah.
playwrights and theater. And I didn't want to let this conversation end without asking for you to expand, if you'd like, a little bit more about that, because I think that's a topic that some people would get and maybe some people wouldn't. Is there
Yeah.
anything more you can say about that topic?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We were having a chat about the role of criticism in the theater, and especially in the independent theater, where you don't always get the big critics to come out and see your work, but there are often a raft of community reviewers. And so, there's this tension between reviewers who, promote your work and critics who can sometimes, rip you to pieces, depending, right? And so, can the theater and our relationship with critics, can it be different? Can it be a more healthy, create a more healthy ecology? My play is a bit ridiculous at this point. It's I mean, when you kidnap a critic on stage, it's kind of revenge based at this point. But I'm not done writing yet. I think I think that everybody reads review. Well, maybe not everybody reads reviews, but when we read reviews in the newspaper or online, Snark, and that's the name of the play. My working title is called Snark, right? Um, it can really be about being funny, being witty, sort of canceling somebody else's work with a well-turned phrase. But there's artists underneath those words and who are bringing those words to life. And so, what is the relationship? How can that be something different than what it is? And I think there are fantastic critics out there too that do a fantastic job of finding a way to provide context for the work and, give the audience a better sense of what's happening. We had an incident up in this neck of the woods about a play called Blackbird. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's about sexual.
I have seen Blackbird at the Warwick Theater, Warwick Museum of Art with Sarah Nicklin Reed, who is a friend of mine.
Oh wow!
This is going back more than 10 years ago.
Wow!
But from, if I got this right, it's about a young, well, she's about 20, 25, and she revisits the man that used to molest her.
Right.
And the question that I got from it, maybe I'm wrong, was their relationship, although she was underage at the time, the play wrestles with the question of, was it a consensual relationship? Was it good for her in some ways? But of course, you're sitting there thinking, how could it be? This is illegal. It's immoral. Am I
Mm-hmm.
wrong? Is that how I remembered it? Is that about
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yes, and it is. It's a play about consent, and and can a child give consent? And for sure. So the critic in question in our neck of the woods wrote a piece about it that missed the mark. It didn't provide that context, but, talked about the actress's legs or whatever. And so it was such a tone deaf piece. And then what ended up happening was, social media kicked in, and it became because a couple of community reviewers and people who'd seen it said, this is it's sick, it's a terrible play, and no one should go see it. And then and you've seen it. It's a very powerful piece of theater that really asks you to dig deep about, to answer some of the questions, right?
Yes.
And so, I thought it's so interesting how we live in this world of cancel culture, and online snark. So you can just say, don't go see it. It's terrible, piece of crap, it's canceled. But then the critic in question could have provided some really great context for that piece that would have helped the conversation, but that didn't happen. From his perspective, now we did end up, because I got into a bit of a heated debate about the piece and about, canceling work in general online with a friend. We ended up taking it onto a radio station, hosted a debate about it, one of the college radio stations in our area. And it ended up being a fascinating conversation. We had somebody from the sexual assault center there. And then we, had the woman that I had initially gotten into the conversation with, and the critic was chiming in. And it was actually quite a positive thing that came out of it, because we had this really great conversation about it. But what happens if we don't have that conversation? What if it's just personal? Like, what if somebody just doesn't like what you do and trashes you as an artist? It could be pretty scarring too. So I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what's going to make it into my play and what isn't. But that's kind of where I started from. And I had this chat with a friend of mine who's quite a wonderful actor. And he said, a critic called him a black hole on stage once. And he said every time he went on stage after that, just before he stepped on stage, he could hear the voice of that critic. And so in some ways, that external critic can become, or our inner critic can mirror that external critic. Like we've all had bad reviews. I remember my bad review. It can be really damaging. So, what role does criticism play in the arts? And, can there be a kind of a safe place for artists and critics to communicate in a healthy way, so that there's a healthy theater ecology,
I think it's going to be a great piece, because it made me think of so many things that you were talking about. I mean, as far as this Blackbird thing, one thing that comes to my mind is, this reviewer who mentioned the actress's legs. I thought you were going to say that the Twitter community in that area got on this guy for his lousy theater reviews. I mean, if he's just objectifying the actress based on her legs, but missing the whole point of what the show was about, then doesn't say much about him. Then the next thing I was going to say is that a play like Blackbird or any other theater piece can be dissected, analyzed, criticized, and debated, but people are going to pay their $12 or $15 to see Avengers Endgame and make memes about it all summer. And no offense to those movies, but I mean, I kind of feel like Scorsese made a great point a few years ago that these Marvel comic movies or these DC comic movies or even the Star Wars movies now have gotten to the point where they make all of these movies from this universe, whatever universe it is, as a cash cow. It's because they know that people get addicted. And I think a lot of times people hate watch. They hate watch. How are they going to screw up this Star Wars? Are they going to have another Jar Jar Binks in it? How are they going to screw up this Avengers? I can't believe they cast this actress in that movie or this actor. I can't believe that Ben Affleck is Batman, but I'll pay my money to see how bad he is.
Okay, I have to say I love that term. I hate watch. I've never heard it before, but I might steal it.
That's the Mike Messier special with it. That comes from me as a pro wrestling fan. Wrestling's big in Canada, but I'm a lifelong pro wrestling fan. But in the last 4 or 5 years, it's gotten really bad. The content has gotten poor, and and I say to other wrestling fans in these Facebook groups, we are hate watching it. We are watching
Mm.
it out of hate, and we're watching it, but we just want to criticize it because it's not as good as when we were kids or teenagers. So we hate watch. And I think I have friends that go see the Avengers movies. And my friend Rachel went to see the Avengers movie, and I went with her, and I said, well, do you think it's going to be good? And she's like, no, it's going to suck. And I said, how do you know? She said, well, I read some online reviews. But it's, well,
Uh,
why are we going to see this movie? Well, she wants to see how bad it is, So
mm,
I don't,
interesting.
but let's compare that to Blackbird or what I'm
Hmm.
trying to do with Avalonia 7 Theaters Festival, where if people, I would be happy if people came to hate watch my stuff. You know what I mean? Because I just don't get it that as a society, for the most part, people, nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd, and it's not the art, it's the, well, everyone else is seeing this, so I have to go see it. And if people actually stood back and said, hey, you know what, the last two or three Avengers movies or the last two or three Spider-Man movies were not that good, why am I spending my 12 or $15 to go see this? Why don't I
Hmm.
go see a full theater or a lesser known movie and give that a shot? But
Hmm.
I hate to say it, but sometimes people are marks or they're sheep or they're the flock, and we try to get away from that as best we can.
Sure. Yeah. You get invested, right? You get invested in your story or your universe in whatever way that is, and keep going back for more. But I think that's really an interesting way of looking at it. That there is that online culture, right? Of like the Twitterverse, of hate watching, hate everything. There's a lot of snark in the world, and snark is fun, can be fun, but it can be really hurtful and pretty empty in the end. There's really nothing, there's not a lot behind snark. It's just kind of mean, empty meanness. It can be. So, yeah, I don't know.
I
How
was
about,
actually a theater critic myself, Jennifer,
were
and
you?
yeah, but I had the job for about 2 years. I would, I get a theater pass, what do I say, a press pass. It was
Mm-hmm.
one theater that I was doing in Rhode Island just before I moved, and they would give me a free pass, and I would always write very good reviews. And I say that because the first year and a half, their plays all were very good.
Right.
What screwed this particular theater was, and I wrote this in my review, but a nice way, and I noticed that other local reviewers did too. They started using a microphone system that didn't work. So before, I don't know if they were using microphones on the floor or if they were just, the actors were just projecting, but suddenly they had these little Madonna 1990, Vogue tour headsets, and the audio went to crap. And like, depending on where you sat in the theater, you would hear feedback, you'd hear crunch. They did, it was a Man of La Mancha, and you
Mm-hmm.
could tell that the singing was really good, the performing was really good, the costumes were great, but the audio sucked. And when you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing a musical, that you can tell the actors are doing their part, but the either they didn't have an audio person on sitting there, or whoever it was not doing a good job. And it's very frustrating as an audience member knowing that you're seeing something that should be enjoyable and should be great, but it's getting hammered. And I put this in a couple of my reviews, and I noticed that other local critics who would go to the same show, they would also, because we know that they're reading the reviews,
Mm-hmm.
so we're hoping that they'll read the review, they'll learn, and they'll do something about it, but they never did.
No.
you know
See, and that's constructive, right? Like that's a fixable, issue. Sound quality is, and there's nothing worse than sitting in the theater and listening to the crackling and the feedback and whatnot. I just can't. So I understand. That was nice of you to be so generous about it. But it's, yeah, that's a challenging situation for sure. But when you're attacking someone because of their looks, or that's the only thing that you can think of to say that's good about a performer, that's we can do better than that, right? We can be
Right.
constructive. We can have a conversation that's bigger than that.
And that's why I thought that that particular critic about the Blackbird play in your area, I thought he or she was going to get crucified for their objectifying the actress, not that people forgo his lousy review and went right
Yeah.
to the play. That's a little surprising, but What are you going to do, right? That's my Canada impersonation for you.
Unfortunately, it's very accurate. And of course, you also share your name with a very famous Canadian hockey player. So
Yep,
Messier.
Mark Messier. Yep.
Oh, Mark Messier. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
so close.
No, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
he's actually the reason why I started pronouncing it Messier. So
Oh.
because my immediate family was saying Messier, and I was getting picked on by kids. And then when I started hearing about this hockey player from the '80s, I said, well, I'm gonna start saying my name like him, and it's worked. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's very Canadian pronunciation as well, French Canadian. Yeah.
and then MikeMessier.com is still there for everybody's Mike Messier needs, wants, and desires. And DistanceFromAvalon.com, which has the Avalonia 7 Theater Festival that we're putting your interview. We did an interview with Brian Cern today, who wrote another one of our plays. We have Steve St. Louis, who wrote another award-winning play. So this will be the third in our series of interviews, and hopefully we'll have all 7 very soon. But I want to thank you, Jennifer, for being here today, and
Thank you.
appreciate it very much. And
Thanks
any
so much.
final words? Go ahead.
Just thank you ever so much for the work that you're doing. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to get to chat with you today. Stay well.
Thanks, Jennifer. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We appreciate it.